Welcome to the Jessie Freeze Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station. Brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
I'm Jessie Freeze. 8 candidates, including New Jersey's Chris Christie, minus Donald Trump, took the stand at the first presidential debate of 2024. Which candidate distinguished themselves by attacking the front runner, the presumed favorite to clinch the nomination? Which candidate made inroads among the voters by not showing up? Did Donald Trump give the voters and the American public a chance to see and hear the opinions of the other candidates on subjects of importance to America? Will any of the candidates emerge as the front runner who has a shot at beating Donald Trump? If Trump emerges as the winner, does this mean the grand old party is going to nominate for the third time a man who has been indicted 4 times on 91 felony counts, and a man who was just fingerprinted and got a mugshot taken at the Fulton County Jail? After weeks of speculation over whether he would show up, Donald Trump announced on his social media platform he would not attend. He said, quote, "The public knows who I am and what a successful presidency I had," end quote. He wrote in capital letters, "I will therefore not be doing the debates." There are still 5 months ahead before the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, and anything can happen, and time will tell. Joining me this morning, Herb Jackson, political editor, CQ Roll Call, leading Capitol Hill newspaper based in Washington, D.C., formerly with the Daily Record, Gannett News, and USA Today Network. Welcome back, Herb Jackson.
Good morning. How are you?
And Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider NJ, and they'll be discussing the first GOP debate ahead of the 2024 election. It's great to have you back with us, Max Pizzaro.
Thank you so much, Jessie. It's great to be on with you and Herb.
Before we assess the candidates' performance, during the Fox News debate, Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson presumably played a recorded interview to detract from the Republican debate. What is your take on this? And we'll start with you, Herb Jackson.
Oh, it was classic Trump. I mean, it was, I'm not the center of attention, but I'll find a way to get attention anyway. I mean, I fully expect that if the Democrats had a debate, he would be outside with a bullhorn trying to get attention. But yeah, no, he wasn't going to be on the stage in Milwaukee, so he invited Tucker Carlson up to Bedminster and taped a written interview, which they put out on the platform formerly known as Twitter, called X now. And, you know, it started airing 5 minutes before the debate did on Fox.
Right. And Max Pizzaro, your take on that?
Well, I agree with Herb. I do think that he is doing everything he can to discredit the forum. He had some very choice words for Fox and mourning the death of Fox News now that Tucker Carlson is gone. And in fact, delighted to give Tucker Carlson an exclusive interview.
And Trump surrendering the day after the debates to the Fulton County Jail appears to be a timed plan move to dominate the headlines and distract from the debate. Did this take away from the discussions at the debates, Max?
I don't think so, Jessie. I think we supposedly are sufficiently trained to be able to do several things at once, or to allow different things to occupy our attention. And I think that the debate still saturated, and a lot of people that are curious about politics today are still very engaged in what happened there, while fascinated and deeply concerned about Donald Trump.
Max, Trump called for protesters to show up at the Fulton County Jail when he had to appear. Is he allowed to call for rioters?
Well, that is, in fact, precisely what seems to be the issue. at hand in the federal indictment, Jesse, because he called for people to storm the Capitol. And now so apparently he thinks he's above the law, and we'll see if indeed he is as he faces all these indictments.
And Bonnie Willis, the judge and election workers are receiving death threats against themselves and their families. What has America been reduced to? Who wants to take that?
Well, I think that part of the problem you have is people who are predisposed to be angry and unstable have a lot of things to fire them up. You don't necessarily want to believe that they're being intentionally radicalized, but there are people who are in positions of responsibility who avoid saying certain things because of the possibility that they could inadvertently give somebody the idea that that's what they're encouraged to do. And, that avoidance thing is just something that Mr. Trump has never been into. He doesn't think he should have to avoid saying anything that he doesn't feel like saying. If he feels like saying it, he says it. And if somebody does something wrong, he goes, well, that's their fault. I didn't want that.
Right. And is our Constitution being stomped on by the extremists?
No, I mean, the Constitution prevails. The Constitution abides. I mean, the Constitution is why you have a court system and why you have federal, so I don't think it's been stomped on. I mean, I think there are people who may have been trying to evade it or thought that they found a loophole in it. That, I still love this idea that Al Gore was the vice president who presided when they counted the ballot that made George Bush the president. Even though Al Gore sued to stop that counting, if the vice president had the power to stop people from becoming president, he could have used it then. But it was one of these things where, I mean, the justice system will come into play is where did they cross the line into criminality? And I didn't go to law school. I will just watch the trials and report on them.
And Max,
Jesse and Herb, I thought that, pardon me, Jesse, but I thought that the debate contained at least one compelling moment last night when former Vice President Mike Pence talked about choosing the Constitution over Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't want him to certify the 2020 election, and he did anyway because he felt it was his constitutional obligation to do so. So that was very much at the heart of the debate last night, that question that you asked.
Yeah, we're going to get to Mike Pence very shortly, but according to the RNC, there were 8 debaters, including New Jersey's Chris Christie. How did you assess Chris Christie, and did he make any headway, Max?
I think that Chris Christie was the most booed candidate at the forum. It was a lively audience, right, Herb? Because he seemed to be speaking sense. He has definitely carved out a position as intolerant of someone positioning himself above the law, which is what Trump did. And so Christie is adamant that we are either a nation of laws or we aren't. And that argument that he made repeatedly met with much derision. So he has, however, in a Monmouth University poll that we released on Insider NJ a couple of weeks ago, he has gained some ground among those who are still looking for a law and order candidate. So if Trump implodes utterly, if he crumbles, Christie has positioned himself as the most viable anti-Trump Republican primary candidate.
You're right. He gained 14% support, moving into second place in New Hampshire behind Trump. And another poll shows Christie 5 points ahead of DeSantis, who slid to 4th in the ranking behind Vivek Ramaswamy, who garnered 11% of voter support. But before we get to him, what is your assessment of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' performance? Is he right for the country?
I don't think Governor DeSantis had the night he needed. He needed to just put people away. And instead, he seemed to be going along, or he made some of his points. He pushed himself as the, anti-woke, I stopped this in Florida. He misled people about what he did during the COVID pandemic. But certainly Florida was less restrictive later in the pandemic than a lot of other states, or was earlier to reopen. But he made it sound like he never shut down. But, the fact of the matter is they want to say we shouldn't look back on January 6th or what happened between the election in November and what happened in Inauguration Day. At the same time, they want to look back at COVID and say the Democrats ruined the economy with their shutdown. I'll steal a line that somebody used on one of the cable shows last night, that the people who think Ron DeSantis is going to be president haven't met him. The more you look at him, there's things there that just don't inspire. He's not likable. I'm sorry, as much as people in New Jersey got infuriated by Chris Christie,
Yeah.
especially toward the end of his term, he
Mhm.
was entertaining.
Mhm.
So you could take listening to him sometimes in a way that sometimes I watch other politicians and I'm like, how does this person win votes? Because they just seem to want to be antagonists all the time. Now, the problem with Christie, of course, is he's antagonized Democrats and he's antagonized Republicans. He has the lowest approval rating or the highest disapproval rating, even higher than Trump's, of all the candidates running for president right now. It's higher than Biden's because he's disliked by both Democrats and some Republicans. And Max is totally right. He got the most boos, although there was some boos for Pence and there was some boos for Asa Hutchinson.
Right.
But, that's probably the only time we'll mention Asa Hutchinson now. 20 minutes, right?
Herb, Christie seemed coherent and DeSantis seemed out of focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Max?
Sure.
Yes, I would just say this. I agree with everything that Herb said. I would just add this, the fascinating wrinkle, and he mentioned it. DeSantis mentioned how he had fired 2 district attorneys because they were too lenient with
Yes,
criminals.
I heard that.
And this plays right into the Fani Willis case, because now the House is undertaking an investigation into Fani Willis, and the allies of the Fulton County District Attorney are hoping that the governor, Brian Kemp, actually stands up for her and protects her. So they're invoking DeSantis. These are Willis's allies saying, look, the governor needs to do the opposite of what DeSantis did. And here's DeSantis bragging about how he pushed around these district attorneys. So again, we have the politicized climate of law enforcement and executive power vis-a-vis law enforcement. Fascinating.
Certainly is. Tell us your thoughts on the young entrepreneur, Vivek Ramsey, who was quite vocal during this and seemed to take a large part of the audience's time.
Yeah,
Max?
This is Herb. I'll take that. One of the things I mentioned this to Max a little earlier before we came on. There was a thing that one of Christie's aides told us 4 years ago, in 2019, when the Democrats had the big debate thing, is that a trick to avoid giving the person you really want, as you see as your rival, airtime is to attack the guy who's not. So if Christie, the example they gave was like if Cory Booker, when he was on the stage with a bunch of other senators, wanted to keep Elizabeth Warren from getting airtime, he'd attack Amy Klobuchar. And then Amy Klobuchar would get 30 seconds to respond, and then he might get 15 seconds to go. And that's a whole minute and a half that Elizabeth Warren was never on the air, right? So maybe they don't want Ron DeSantis, who might be better in fighting back and defending himself, from getting airtime. So they pick on Ramaswamy. Or maybe they think Ramaswamy is moving up and DeSantis is moving down, and we got to take this guy's legs out. I mean, I certainly think Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor and former UN ambassador, standing next to him was very effective at saying, like, if you just hand over Ukraine to Russia, the next place they're going to go is to a NATO country, and then it'll be our soldiers that will be put in the fight. And you don't have the foreign policy experience to talk about she made points to a Republican audience in a way they may not be hearing it right now. But when you watch some of the coverage I watched afterward last night, especially like a focus group in Iowa, people who don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about this, and it's my job. I spend too much time thinking about it. It appeals when you just hear somebody say, well, why are we even doing this? Why aren't we doing that?
Right.
And if you do it well enough and you're entertaining and you seem fresh and you seem like you don't have the baggage and you can get somewhere. So he's not going to go away. He certainly came out of this with his, feeling more wind behind him. I don't know that it's going to be enough to win the nomination, and certainly the derided, he's been derided as saying he'll get the vice presidential nomination from Trump.
Right. Max, what was your feeling on Vivek Ramsey?
I think he filled the space that Trump left for that outsider businessman who, as Herb said, seems uncontrolled or maybe is uncontrollable by those conventional forces that typically exist to buffer these public personalities. And so I think the crowd responded to him because he does not sound canned. And yet I think Herb noted, and I agree, that when it came down to the nitty gritty of policy, Nikki Haley really showed him to be a lightweight. So there's an upside and a downside. The upside is excitement at having someone there who doesn't speak in polished little phrases that everyone is used to hearing. The downside is when it comes to actually exhibiting real command of the issues, he seems in over his head.
Right. And after his loyal performance getting to Mike Pence, then disobeying Trump's order, does former Vice President Mike Pence have a chance? And what about his stance on abortion, Max?
He certainly is trying to have it both ways, Jessie, I think, because I noticed throughout the debate, he was quick to thrust out his chest on some of the gains made during the Trump years on the economy and fighting the pandemic, I think was another one that he cited, while keeping Trump at a distance. So he is trying to thread a needle, and it's a very difficult place for him to be. It's a difficult tightrope for Pence to walk.
Yeah, I agree with Max right there. I mean, Pence, every time somebody wanted to attack the previous administration, it fell on Pence to defend it, right?
Yes.
You know, but he also was trying to say, especially on abortion, like he wanted credit for the 3 Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe, right? Because they were nominated by Trump and confirmed during the Trump administration. Now, when he went further and argued with Haley was, there's a lot of evidence right now that you can't, even in some pretty red states, that properly framed and a pro-abortion message is losing. They tried to change the Constitution in Ohio a couple of weeks ago to make it harder to pass an amendment to the state constitution in November that would declare abortion rights, a pro-choice position.
Right.
That lost big time. That lost in more counties than, it was defeated in counties that Trump won. There's an argument then that maybe the Republican candidates don't want to push too hard on this issue, but they are really being pressured because they've been promising this for decades, and now it's time to deliver. So Pence is sitting there saying, hey, this is leadership that I want to do a 15-week abortion ban. And they want to push the Democrats back and make them explain why they do support abortion. And then they kind of exaggerate and say up until viability, they say they want. But it is going to be one of the things that they're going to be fighting about through this year. I think that Haley was very, very clever in pointing out they don't have 60 votes for anything in the Senate, and so therefore nothing will get enacted, and the president himself or herself will not really get to do much in this.
Right. Well, we're going to get to Nikki Haley next. We've got about a minute to this next break, but she really came out fighting against and got very high marks. She came down hard on Trump. She said he added $8 trillion to our national debt and only helped the 1%ers with generous tax breaks. She did say, though, she would pardon Trump if she was elected president. And when we get back, we'll ask you both her chances on winning. We're talking to Herb Jackson, political editor, CQ Roll Call, leading Capitol Hill newspaper based in Washington, D.C., and Max Mazzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider NJ. I'm Jessie Fries. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Jessie Fries Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. We're talking to Herb Jackson, political editor, CQ Roll Call, and Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider NJ. Very quickly, to get to Nikki Haley, what is your prediction for her? What are your thoughts very quickly?
Sure, this is Herb. I would say that she's gonna stay in it for a lot longer than maybe I thought she would before this, but I still think she's got a tough road to get anywhere besides. I just think she's got a tough road. She's not going to win Iowa, so I don't know where. And there's a lot of fight in South Carolina. Trump's popular in South Carolina. Tim Scott is the senator from South Carolina. That's her home state. But if she doesn't win South Carolina, where does she go from there?
Right. And Max Pizzaro, your take on her?
She stands out for obvious reasons, and she has a great resume, and she has a couple of degrees more removal from Trump than former Vice President Pence. But I agree with her. But I think it's going to be a tough scale.
Now, when the candidates were asked if Trump was indicted for his crimes, would they still back him? 6 raised their hands, yes, and they would still support him. 2 did not. If you've been charged with a crime against this nation, should you be able to run again?
I think people should. This is Herb. I think somebody should be able to run, but it's kind of surprising how many people are willing to get behind him. And they were asked if they would still support him if he were convicted, which was even more surprising. I think if you're convicted, we certainly saw in corruption cases in New Jersey, people who were convicted were removed from office. But the Constitution does not say the way to remove somebody from office in our Constitution is impeachment. So.
Right. And Max Pizzaro, your take on this?
Well, Jesse, I do find it intriguing that Christie I think it was Christie and former Governor Hutchinson.
Asa Hutchinson,
Asa Hutchinson, right? But Christie's stance here is intriguing because, of course, he was the former U.S. attorney for New Jersey, and a lot of his political enemies thought that he politicized the U.S. attorney's office and really weaponized it and used it to remove political foes and to create the structure by which he could ascend to the governorship. So, to me, Christie, in this debate on the national level, underscores just that this issue itself, namely, and we're going to see a lot more of it, we're going to see the weaponization of law enforcement on both sides as we intensify this 2024 election season.
That's right. And to get to the last 2, and we'll do that very quickly, South Carolina U.S. Senator Tim Scott's name in the surfaces. Does he have a shot? And Doug Burgum, an American entrepreneur and governor of North Dakota, is virtually unknown. How do you rate them?
I've never quite understood the Burgum candidacy. And Tim Scott has a lot of appeal, but I didn't see him get anything that really helped out of this debate last night, on Thursday night, Wednesday night, whatever night it was. I don't know.
What difference?
Yeah, I didn't see Tim Scott getting a big bump out of it, so I can't see how this makes it. He's down in the low single digits. It's not going to move him up.
And do you concur also?
I think they're appealing, and maybe the lack of specifics will give them an opportunity. Maybe they'll stay around because they're likable. Perhaps Tim Scott, I think, is in a better position there, Jesse. But I agree with her. But I just don't hear enough hard argument to really keep them. Listen, we're in such a strange environment politically. Person says nothing and succeeds as a consequence. But if we're looking at emptiness and nothingness, perhaps they'll do great.
And sending money to support Ukraine in the war with Russia caused a heated exchange among the candidates. What are both of your takes very quickly?
This is going to be playing out in the next couple of weeks because there's a supplemental appropriation that the president sent to Congress, and they come back a week after Labor Day. There needs to be money appropriated if we're going to keep supporting the Ukraine the way we have been, and Congress is going to have that fight, and people are going to see it. So it's not surprising that some people in that debate were for it and some people were against it, because that's where the Republican Party is right now.
In this nation so divided on issues, how can we learn to disagree better and come together with solutions to help this country? Max?
I think people need to come on the Jessie Freeze show.
Yeah, Max, fix that, solve that,
right? I do.
Okay,
I think we need more civilized and refining forums like this one, Jesse, honestly.
And before we leave this part of the session, what is your take on former President Trump's desire to have his trial moved to 2026? And by the way, Fani Willis just announced she's asking for an October 23rd trial date. Both of you just answered that.
Well, I think there's a presidential election between now and then, isn't there, Herb?
Yeah, there is.
Maybe that has something to do with it.
Certainly Trump thinks he's going to get elected and then he can pardon himself. But I'm still skeptical that we'll see any of these trials before the 2024 election. I really am.
Yeah, and to change the subject, Prigozhin was reported a passenger on his plane that was just mysteriously crashed over Russia. And after his attempted coup against Putin, should he have watched his back? History shows that no one crosses Putin and exists. Your thoughts? Who wants to take that?
I mean, this isn't my area
Putin
as much as, but I would say
he's a nefarious dictator, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised he even went back to Russia. I really am. I think he was in Belarus and then he was in Africa. I would have thought the minute you cross back into Russia, you had a target on your back. So.
Okay, I have 2 minutes to end this show, but the Associated Press reported that Putin previously denounced Prigozhin's actions as treason and a stab in the back and vowed to avenge. However, Putin just sent a very strong condolences to his family. Hypocritical?
A little bit.
Yes, he's a Machiavellian figure, much worse at that. So I'm sure he's laughing about it.
I'm sure he is. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end, and we thank you very much, Herb Jackson, political editor, CQ Roll Call, leading Capitol Hill newspaper based in Washington, D.C., and also Max Pizzaro, editor-in-chief and co-founder of Insider NJ, for this very interesting discussion on the candidates' race for president. Thank you for appearing on the show this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's great to be on with you and Herb Jackson. Appreciate it.
We do too. I'm Jessie Fries. We'll be right back.